So this is part 4 of the analysis of Goblin Market. Remember, there are 3 other parts that you need to have watched before you look at this bit. Otherwise it won't make sense to you. So this is the section of the poem where Laura starts to deteriorate following her fall to temptation. So first thing to notice is there's an ominous time change in this part of the poem. So before, remember, they were nestled up together in the tree and everything was lovely and they were going about their domestic chores, and then it kind of left on a bit of a cliffhanger where we found out that Laura was still longing for something that wasn't there. So this time change suggests that something bad is happening or something bad is about to happen. So remember, the evening is always associated with darkness and evil. So the fact that evening comes could be a suggestion that this is the time when Laura can be at one with her yearnings and lead herself to temptation. So as usual, there's a comparison between the two characters. So you've got Lizzie, who's the really stoic, virtuous, perfect Victorian woman, and Laura, who is the fallen woman. So Lizzie's described as placid, so calm, and then Laura is described with a simile comparing her to a leaping flame. So we looked previously at the idea of fire and how that connotes warning. So before, in the first few stanzas, you had the fire-like Barberries being sold to Laura, and that there was that warning of danger. And the fact that she's a flame as well could suggest that she could burn out pretty quickly. So she's really fierce and exciting now, but we know that fire doesn't last forever. Eventually it burns itself out. And Lizzie plucks purple and rich golden flags. So down at the Reedy Brook, these flags are actually irises. And irises have quite a lot of meaning behind them, quite a lot of symbolism. They could be an allusion to Mary, the mother of Jesus, because she picked these flowers, and also because they can be associated with the pain that Mary experienced when Jesus was crucified. And this could then in turn link to the fact that Laura is sacrificial because she has given herself to temptation, which was her sacrifice. And then also the sacrifice that Lizzie is going to have to make to repair her sister. And then we've started to see lots of symbolism of Jesus starting to seep in now because Lizzie becomes the saviour like Jesus. So the warning again, come Laura, not another maiden lags. So there's this constant warning of conforming to ideal Victorian stereotypes of how women should behave. They shouldn't hang about, they shouldn't be in the darkness. And Lizzie really does believe these thoughts and these rules, and she tries to keep her sister adhering to these rules so that she can be a perfect Victorian woman as well. And then it suggests Laura loitered still among the rushes. So we've always had this link through alliteration of Laura and loitering, and the idea of her loitering suggests that she's looking for trouble, she's up to no good, and it's still her verb that is being used to associate her with at the end of this part. So despite all of the warnings that Lizzie's tried to give her, it's too late for Laura. She's completely addicted to whatever it was she ate, and she needs more of it. And this idea of Laura saying that the bank was too steep, obviously that could just be an excuse of why she can't leave the Reedy Brook where she's waiting for the Goblin men. It could be a metaphorical steepness to redemption, so the idea of it being too difficult to find redemption, kind of like Uphill, the poem where Rossetti talks about how difficult it is to adhere to God's wishes and uphold your faith against temptation. And perhaps that's what Laura is experiencing. So as the poem marches on, Laura explores her memories of the Goblin men. So she hears the echoes of their actions in her thoughts. She is a kind of stereotypical fallen woman here, where she can't let go of the bad things that have happened to her. And her story mimics that of Jeannie's, and perhaps what Rossetti is saying is there is a certain type of woman, like Jeannie, like Laura, that are susceptible to yielding to temptation. However, the positive imagery down here suggests that there is a bias in Laura's memories. So before we knew that they were sly and leering. However, when Laura remembers them, she remembers them racing, whisking, tumbling, hobbling, almost quite childlike imagery where they seem to be just a bit mischievous, not the really dangerous and evil people that they actually are. So Lizzie tries again to get Laura to come away from the reedy brook. She says, "Oh, Laura, come, I hear the fruit call but dare not look." So this suggests that Lizzie is definitely more restrained and virtuous than Laura, because even though she hears the fruit callers, she doesn't long to go and taste the fruits. She doesn't long to give in to that temptation. It could also suggest that she lacks the same sexual appetite. So remember, if we're looking through a queer theory lens, perhaps this is because Lizzie herself is gay and she doesn't want to indulge in heterosexual relations. So maybe that's why she lacks that sexual appetite. And then there's a reminder of nighttime. So that's the warning that's coming. Nighttime's approaching, bad things are about to happen. Remember, again, you can link this to the world and the difference between nighttime and daytime as Rossetti presents them. And then there's a change in tone. So this is a metaphorical change in tone as well. So the warning is that even though it's summer right now and everything seems lovely and the pleasure seems good and the high is really great, this will change, and the rain will come and the wind will come and everything will be destroyed. So there's a warning through the use of weather. And then Lizzie finally questions, if we lost our way, what should we do? And perhaps this is a question about a fallen woman. If a woman falls, can she ever get back to where she was before? Can she ever reclaim her reputation or her purity or her relationship with God? And now we see that there's a physical change in Laura, who is really suffering through these withdrawal symptoms. Could this be a punishment from God or from society, that she's been cast aside and she's been completely disowned because of the way that she's behaved? Or is it just a physical manifestation of the impure thoughts and actions that she has had? And then she's described as being deaf and blind. So this metaphorically represents Laura's emptiness. And we said before that she has sated her appetite temporarily, but she's been left alone and she's been left without that positive feeling. And then there's that loss of innocence that is intimated here. And we see that this deterioration gets worse in this next stanza. The tree of life drooped from the root, so she has no reason to live anymore. It could also be suggestive of the fact that she can't be part of the reproductive human nature because of the way she's been tainted by the goblins. So she can't be a proper woman anymore because she can't give birth or she can't produce children. And then the fact that she says not one word obviously could be her own choice not to speak anymore, but it could be a wider contextual significance in that she has been silenced because she hasn't conformed to society anymore. So she has to be shut away, like the women in the penitentiary that Rossetti was looking after. So the fallen women, all silenced, all shut away from society's view. And then there's a melancholy semantic field, which contrasts with Laura's previous vivacity. So before she was a leaping flame and she was sucking the fruit, and now she's trudging and dripping and creeping. So we can see this physical decay in her now. And the fact that she gnashes and weeps, these are stereotypically actions that are associated with withdrawal, so withdrawal from quite a strong drug or from alcohol, they can cause people to gnash their teeth or grind their teeth, and obviously have a lot of emotional responses to that. So these could be symbolic of a physical withdrawal symptom from drugs, if you're looking at it from that allegorical perspective, or from the temptation. It could also contextually link to syphilis, which was a sexually transmitted disease that was quite rife during the Victorian period because of promiscuity and the rise in sex workers. And syphilis made people go really crazy. So the fact that she's gnashing her teeth is often associated with mental illness, and that may be because she has a sexually transmitted infection. So the day after day, night after night, we've seen this before with the goblins and their actions, but now this is Laura's action. So her relentlessness echoes the goblin men, so she's following in their steps, almost mirroring their actions, because she's been taken over by them and completely transfixed by them and transformed by them. And then her hair down here grows thin and grey. So remember, before she had golden hair, now her hair is thinning, it's grey, it's obviously starting to fall out. The hair is a reflection of her spirit, so it's a manifestation of the things that she has done, possibly suggesting that she cannot live after the impact of the fruit, so either through choice or through societal expectations. And then the idea that she is decaying because of her sexuality contrasts Renaissance writing, which usually suggested that women would decay if they didn't utilize their sexuality. So the idea of this is this constant contradiction between how women should behave. Should they give themselves to men and be sexually active in the way that men want them to be, or should they be chaste and keep themselves for one man as men want them to be? So there's that constant idea of the balance between decay and sexuality. And then, as we mentioned before, her fire has started to dwindle. So we mentioned that she was a leaping flame before. We knew that she would burn out eventually, and now she is starting to diminish. There's a repeated image here of the kernel stone, which was the thing that she took away after her fruit eating expedition. And the fact that she tries to grow it suggests that she is trying to rekindle her previous pleasure, trying to get something back from that, trying to reclaim it. However, it doesn't grow. And this imagery here links to the fact that she could be infertile, metaphorically as well as physically, because she's a fallen woman. So she's not the angel in the house anymore. She can never be that. She is incompatible with those ideals because she's experienced sexuality before marriage. This continues with the semantic field of barrenness down here, with the shade, the desert, the thirstiness. So there's definitely this sense that she has ruined her chances of a good marriage, ruined her chances of becoming a mother because of her rash actions. The fact that she no more sweeps the house or tended or fetched the honey or kneaded cakes is a repetition or emphasis of the fact that she can't ever be the angel in the house. She can't be domestic anymore. So she cannot nurture. And again, this is a consequence of her actions. The way that she is described as not eating could be self-harm, so a punishment that she feels she deserves herself for the actions that she has carried out, or it could be a societal punishment that again she's just been left to decay because of the way that she's behaved. We see this emphasis on the relationship between Lizzie and Laura, this interdependent relationship. Lizzie is the consistency in Laura's life. Perhaps Laura is less part of the relationship than Lizzie is, because Lizzie seems to be completely devoted to Laura. But she is always there. She's heralded as this perfect Victorian woman who is very faithful, very loyal. And Lizzie becomes pursued by the Goblin men, and perhaps because she remains pure, and that's something that was valued by men in the Victorian period. And they wanted that purity, they wanted to be the first person to experience sex with that woman. And that's how Lizzie has become now. She's become desirable because she is resistant. And as I mentioned earlier, Lizzie becomes this saviour. So she talks about how she's going to buy fruit to comfort her sister or her lover, or however you want to read it. So she's really worried about the consequences of doing so, but she's willing to sacrifice herself to do that. So that could be a Jesus type role, or this could be how Rossetti viewed herself working in the penitentiary with the fallen women, that she was their saviour, she was there to give them redemption. Jeannie is reminded to us again, this foreshadows Laura's fate. This cautionary tale is really powerful to Lizzie. She remembers it all the time. I think she reminds herself of it about 3 times in total in the poem. So interestingly, Lizzie takes a silver penny in her purse to pay for the fruit, which implies that she's not prepared to give herself to the goblins in a way that Laura did when she gave them her hair. She's aware of the goblins' threats. She's perhaps a bit more savvy than Laura in that she understands what they want from her, but she's not willing to give it to them, so she comes prepared. Here she takes on the conventions of the hero in a literary sense, that she kisses Laura and then she crosses the heath. It's almost like the hero going off into battle, which is quite profound really for a female character at this time, which suggests that Rossetti did have a lot of respect for strong women. They just had to be adhering to the correct conventions. And again, this is the first time in her life that she's going to do this. She's going to at least listen to the goblins. This could be revelatory for Lizzie. Is she going to fall into temptation like Laura did? It's actually really dangerous action for her, because until now she stuck her fingers in her ears and she wouldn't listen. So she wouldn't even allow herself to be tempted. Now she's putting herself in harm's way. She's not too certain which way it's going to go.